Good afternoon and welcome to ICT SkillNet's webinar on cybersecurity entitled How Cyber Safe Are You? My name is Paul Hearns. I'm a journalist and commentator in the area of ICT for more than 20 years. So as some of you may know, this is European Cyber Safety Month, and there are information and resources available for young and old, consumer and business at cybersecuritymonth.eu. So today we're going to be talking about the international as well as the domestic picture. And An Garda Síochána have said that recently they have reported an increase in scams by around 440% in the first 6 months of 2021. And this is everything from email scams to telephone fraud, mobiles and everything. So how are we to recognize these things? How are we to protect ourselves against them, both as individuals and consumers and businesses? So to discuss this topic and to provide some practical advice to keep you safe, whether you're at work or at home, while accessing devices in public places, I'm joined by Paul C Dwyer, President of the International Cyber Threat Task Force, and also founder and CEO of Cyber Risk International. And Paul has recently participated in a number of TV and radio programs on this topic, so he's well versed and up to date. We're also joined by Michael Conway, Director of Renaissance Ireland, who is a veteran of the ICT industry and is going to be talking around the business perspective in particular. And we're also joined by Carmel Somers, Chair of the Cyber Skills Initiative and Cyber Ireland board member. A long-time industry veteran herself as well, and she'll be talking about the skills and education needs necessary to keep up with this and to get people up to speed. So hopefully everyone is familiar with Zoom by now. So just to point out to you, at the bottom of your screen, you've got the Q&A function and the chat function. There's also a raise hand function there as well. So we're going to do a little bit of a discussion first, where we're going to talk around some of the points, but we'd encourage you to submit questions as we go. You can also add comments, insights, resources, relevant links or anything in the chat function, and we'll keep an eye on that there to point people in the right direction. If you wish to address a question directly, you can raise your hand, and our producer today, Sarah, will be able to bring you on mic if you want to address something or respond to something either. So please do take advantage of all of that. We're trying to keep this as conversational as possible, and we're really looking for as much interactivity as we can. We're going to be running a couple of polls throughout as well, and we'll get you to respond to those, and we'll incorporate them into the discussion. So just a reminder that these sessions are recorded for later distribution, and they will be made available through the YouTube channel on ICTskillnet.ie. So keep an eye out there as well for other relevant courses and resources as well. There's everything from digital transformation workshops to certificates in emerging technology. So on to our program for today. So I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists to give us a little bit of background, a general kind of scene setting in terms of the current cyber landscape. So Paul, if I could start with you. We've heard so much in the media recently, both specialist and mainstream, about increasing threats, increasing incidents, all that sort of thing. So in terms of your work, both as a cybersecurity professional and then in terms of the Cyber Threat Task Force and kind of coordinating efforts as well, what's your view in terms of what we've seen in the last kind of 6 to 12 months?
Thanks, Paul. I think what we've seen is a greater volume, certainly, of threats being realized, and that they're almost quite pedestrian kind of scams, but still they're effective, and they often use a technique known as spray and pray. In other words, that they're not very targeted. They're just sending out these massive lists. There could be 20 million, 50 million emails, 2 million text messages at a go, and these guys are all doing this based on the premise of, if 1 in a million clicks on it, they make $1 million a year. That's generally how the maths works around this. But there's also we're seeing a proliferation of more targeted attacks as well in parallel with this activity. So you've got all this sort of newbie scammers getting into the world of cybercrime because it's become so easy to download some crimeware and carry out this kind of activity and operate with almost impunity and make bank. I mean, they're making money out of this. And then you have the OCGs, the organized criminal groups, who are working with their targeted campaigns where they're looking for 7-figure returns. And they're putting in the work. They're looking for return on investment, and they're playing the longer game. They're playing the low and slow game where they will take their time, and they're using COVID as an opportunity, because with everybody working from home, working in residential, gateways, networks, maybe the architecture isn't the way it should be, maybe the controls aren't the way they really should be. COVID itself, we've often referred to it as, the most effective digital transformation officer the world has ever seen. So all of these changes have given an opportunity for bad guys who are opportunists at the end of the day to make bank, and we're seeing an awful lot of this activity. I think 440% is very specific, but I think it's also very conservative. I think we're well into well over 1,000% in growth rate of what we're seeing the activity out there.
Okay, Michael, from your perspective then, in terms of the range of businesses that you deal with, what's your impression in terms of what people are experiencing and perhaps how they're dealing with it?
I think it's very interesting, Paul, what's happened over time. People are experiencing fear. I would suggest that's a significant worry and concern for them. They're experiencing concern. They're experiencing fear. They're worried about what this might all mean. They hear stats like the ones you've talked about there. They hear big numbers, but they also hear horror stories about colleagues and friends and smaller organizations who've been hit and attacked. They may not be one of the targeted ones that Paul's suggesting. They may well be one of the drive-bys or whatever, but the impact is huge for them. And I think one of the challenges that they're seeing is that they used to say, listen, we'll put in a firewall, we'll put in a bit of antivirus, boom, 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 we'll be good. But actually now they're not. They're worried about everything. They're worried about their people working remotely, as Paul says, with COVID and the effect of ransomware. So I think there's an element of fear out there. I think there's an element as well among organizations that they say, we can't manage this ourselves anymore. We used to be able to go and buy something that kept us safe. We can't manage this anymore. We need to be more monitored, more managed, and all of those sort of things. So I think those elements are absolutely what we're seeing out there in that market. And when I talk about the market, I'm talking about the environment, the economy out there. And that place, that's changed quite dramatically, I'd say, in the last 12, 24 months for sure.
Okay. And Carmel, in terms of the demand then that you're seeing to try and upskill or cross-skill people for individuals and organizations coming to you, what kind of either growth or change in demand are you seeing?
I suppose that the main thing that we've seen, Paul, over the last couple of years has been not just a demand for technical in the cyberspace in terms of learning and programs, but also businesses are actually starting to look at, well, what do I do in terms of my business, so that there is this kind of business outlook to cyber and also that technical outlook. And, if I look back at when we started the Cybersecurity Skills Initiative out of ICT SkillNet with a whole range of companies that, were joined up and were part of the steering group for it, it was very much then, and that's only 2018, it was very much focused on technical. So, turn around and we're in 2021 and we're now seeing a business focus as well. And I suppose the other thing is, and really we knew we would do a webinar for Cyber Security Month. And just recently I saw Paul actually on a very famous RTE program that was highlighting this. And I actually learned some things from it. And I sort of sat back and said, oh my God, here am I, who is on the periphery of cybersecurity. I'm not a techie, but I'm involved in the learning part of it. I sit on the board of Cyber Ireland, as you said, and I've learned some things about things I should be doing to protect myself, and I kind of thought I knew. So that was an eye-opener. Hence, we're doing this webinar, because I said, if I'm learning something, there must be other people out there who are kind of on the periphery like me and need to kind of hear what's going on and how to mitigate against it. So I think we're seeing everything from training, but also awareness. And then we're seeing certainly the difference between not just technical training, but now actually starting to focus on the business as well from a cyber perspective.
Okay. Well, Paul, coming back to you then, maybe getting a little bit more specific, in the sort of increase that we have seen recently, you mentioned that some of these efforts are a little bit pedestrian and simply easier to do than they might have been in the past. But have you seen anything changing within what they're doing? Because I know certainly the incidence of scam calls and spoofed mobile numbers in particular. So I've heard of people getting a call saying, I missed a call from you, I presume it's a scam number. You know, so they seem to be harvesting live numbers to spoof the caller ID to get a scam call through. So has there been a significant evolution, I suppose, in what you're seeing in the volume increase?
There has been, Paul, but I think there's a few issues around this. One is the fact that it is so simple to do this, especially within the Irish ecosystem of the mobile telcos, because there's little to no safeguards in place, and the onus seems to be put from the regulator onto us as consumers and users to say, hey, don't be silly, don't be quote unquote stupid by clicking on a link. But these things are sophisticated. We trust our phones and devices. We live with them 24/7. You know, it's so easy to click on things, you know, and make a mistake, because these guys they're using like neighborhood techniques where they'll use numbers that will look similar to something that you might know. And it's a numbers game. You only have to make a mistake once. They'll hit you 100 times a day. And it's almost getting to the stage that nobody wants to check their voicemail or answer an unidentified number or a number they don't want, because they know it's a scam. Now, if that was happening in the real world, there'd be outcry, and there'd be people saying, hang on, every time I walk down the road, somebody's trying to steal from me. What's going on? So our digital society is gone crazy, and we need to do something about it before it gets completely out of hand. And it always comes down to these three things that I talk about. We learn from road safety effectively. It's about engineering and getting the technical piece. It's about enforcement. So we need more guards, and hopefully the announcement today of 800 guards, so it's 800 cyber guards with resources and proper salaries, so they're not tempted to go into the other industries that will pay them a lot more, because we need skilled people in there and in the defense forces to protect the country itself from cyber threats. But the key thing is education, and that's why, for example, with ICTTF, we started a cyber risk academy at the start of COVID, because we found that the whole, you know, our whole objective of transferring knowledge now had to be done in a different way. And of course, we partner with the likes of ICT SkillNet and so on, and being able to bring that business level education. The fact is, there's over 5 million open cybersecurity jobs, and there isn't 5 million people to fill those. So we have to educate people from within the organizations to fulfill those roles, whether in procurement, legal, compliance, the technical end, whatever it happens to be. We all need to be cyber savvy within our business view. We're living in a digital society. We have to understand how to manage and measure risk within a digital society. And that's where this kind of education comes in place.
Okay. And Michael, then from the business perspective, in terms of the demand you're seeing, some of it, I suppose, is reactionary, and you mentioned there the fact that simply buying a solution to have a protection is not sufficient anymore, and there's a realization that you have to go beyond that. So, is there enough of a recognition of the range of threats to prompt people to move?
I think, Paul, it's a very challenging area, to be honest with you, and it's just like the other Paul mentioned as well. You know, the environment is challenging. It's changing. COVID has been quite an interesting time as well, because like we're really talking about almost 2 years ago since we all met each other and we did what we call normal things, and since then businesses have been to some extent frozen. They've been trying to operate in a strange remote working environment. But as Paul, the other Paul says, there are too many Pauls. But as Paul C says, that the bad guys are getting better at being bad guys. They're very professional at this, and I think what we absolutely see in the business area here is and you've talked about the skills shortage, you've talked about the human risk capital element, if you like. There is a skill shortage. it's the challenge is you can't just go out and hire somebody to sort everything out for you. You can't even just go out and buy a plug a technology that's just going to resolve something for you. So I think what we're seeing is the businesses are really sort of frustrated and confused. They're actually at the point, and we see in many organizations, not just even small, but going towards medium and larger organizations, they're saying, listen, we can't do this anymore. We actually have to outsource this. We have to get people with the technologies, which reduces the requirement for a lot of the people requirements, and also the specific skills, because they have the scale to have the skills to actually manage and monitor my environment outside of, you know, all of the time. So if you take, let's say, an ordinary home or a house or an office or whatever, you'll have 24/7 monitoring available to you through your alarm company. So whenever you're not there, there's somebody looking at it. You look at businesses now, they have CCTV, they have all of those sorts of things. So we're seeing the requirement to have a 24-hour monitoring intervention, and not just monitoring, but somebody actually, you know, we see a big change in solutions like MDR, managed detection and response, being promoted through industry. And that's because some of these people have said, listen, we can't do this anymore. We've got to outsource. We've got to engage with partners. So it's not just the technology, it's the deployment and management of that technology. Because I think, you know, what we're all saying is that the human risk part is huge. The education part is huge. But all of these can only be layers, if you like, in terms of helping to protect. You're going to need some level of skilled management, skilled monitoring, skilled resourcing to assist you in bringing some sort of solution together. And that's definitely what we're seeing throughout the whole economy at this point. So where we end up in 24 months time from now is going to be very interesting, because it's not just buying it something, plugging it in, and away you go. I think we're going to need, you know, as to coin the phrase that the ICTTF have, you need a network to protect yourselves from a network, if you like, even though I didn't coin it very well, but anyway, that's the phrase, but or something like that. But you need network, you need interaction, you need to be working with people. You can't do this on your own ultimately.
Yeah, can I just add to that? Because I think what Michael is saying there as well, effectively, we're evolving from cybersecurity into cyber risk management. Businesses need to manage cyber risk. Full stop. Part of that is having good cybersecurity and good IT security, good information security, all the different disciplines that will be under that. But the business imperative, the board imperative is to manage cyber risk. And that's what they have to do. And that's why, you know, courses like, for example, the Certified Cyber Risk Officer course that, you know, Technology Ireland ICT SkillNet provide with ourselves is ideal for business people. It's business level learning. So they understand how to do that with vendors, with remote workers, with procurement, with all the different aspects of it, not just with digital transformation, but all holistically across the business.
Okay, well, certainly the comments so far seem to be resonating with the audience. So Graham, who's in crime prevention with An Garda Síochána, says he agrees with Paul and that raising awareness has really improved, but they're still seeing people falling foul of the SMS scams. So there seems to be quite a bit of commentary in terms of the suppliers of the networks and the telecoms providers, that they need to step up their protections. So
can I add a little comment there, Paul? And I may regret this, but if I add it in, I mean, think of what happens in the real physical world when criminals walk down a road and they see houses that are easy to break into. When somebody safeguards a house and they put in alarms and so on like that, they go to an easier area. The United States of America and other territories around the world have all put in the safeguards to stop this SMS spoofing. So where are the bad guys going to go? To the territories and the countries that do not have these safeguards in place. The internet is flat for criminals. They don't care where they're sitting, in Russia, China, Ukraine, whatever it is. And this is just another territory for them to hit. And if it's easier to hit, the telcos and all of the consumers in Ireland do that. But I think, you know, we all have to reflect and bite our lip when we see the regulator coming on and putting all the onus on us as consumers and users of technology, that it's up to us to prevent all of this happening. Come on. It's just crazy.
Indeed, it was something that that was an issue a number of years ago in the cybersecurity world. The idea of unconscious victim blaming, that it wasn't helpful in terms of identifying the problems and then helping people actually work through it, and using the experiences of examples. So organizations didn't want to talk about how they had actually been attacked and then how they had dealt with it, and consequently vital information was not being shared at that grassroots level, and it wasn't informing the wider conversation. So it's terrible to see an extension of that even in this context.
Yeah, and it's an uncomfortable subject for some, because I've talked about this before, where I say it's almost like we blame the victims of sex crime. Why were you there at that time of night? Why were you wearing that? Why did you drink that drink? It's ridiculous to blame a victim. And if you're the victim of cybercrime, you're a victim of organized criminals, people that use very advanced and sophisticated techniques, and they only have to be lucky once. So we shouldn't be blaming victims on making a mistake. I have clicked on the wrong links. Anybody has who's honest, and you do things, but it's about what you do afterwards and how do you deal with these kind of things and being able to do that. And that's why, if I stand up narrative, we look at the HSE being taken down with ransomware. Where was the cyber resilience? Resilience is about being able to, recover quickly, being able to minimize the impact, not switch everything off. Where's the preparedness? Ransomware is a symptom of poor cyber hygiene. Full stop. If you don't have good cyber hygiene, then ransomware is going to be all over it. You're not going to be able to contain it. You're not going to be able to do with it. So, and unfortunately, in a situation that we've rewarded the people who were in charge of making sure that wouldn't happen by giving them €1 billion in business. Because the people who were on guard and were meant to protect all of that have effectively just rubbed their hands in the making of fortune and mopping up and trying to make things a lot better. So I think we can learn lessons from that. We wouldn't be vilifying people, but learn lessons from that for smaller businesses and for individuals, that we have a community of responsibility when it comes to cybersecurity. It's not all down to the bank. It's not all down to the telco. It's not all down to ourselves. But if you don't have your updates on your phone, you're culpable.
Yeah, no, if I can interject there, I absolutely agree with Paul there. I mean, we have this, and we see it in businesses as well. Somebody says, well, listen, it was Mary over there who clicked on something and that brought in this. We can only assist Mary, and there is no such thing as 100% protection. There's no such thing as, you shouldn't be blaming. I see the questions there about education in schools and everything else, and all those things are awareness and education. They're training. They're good, but you know what? These things will still happen. So we need to try to help the people so that something doesn't happen. No, there should not be a blame game associated with it, and the protection should be in place to try to catch something if and when something happens. And as Paul absolutely 100% points out there, that in the event that something does happen, then you have in place the appropriate procedures and processes to actually recover. And when I heard, and I won't go after the HSE too hard, but when I heard a minister on a radio saying, well, we have quite extensive backups in place, I'm going, you either have full backups or you don't. What good are they? And we've seen how good the quite extensive backups are anyway. But look, I wouldn't be looking to vilify the individuals involved who are involved there. But as Paul also pointed out at the start, it is a board level responsibility. Boards have responsibilities. I would say that if somebody isn't taking those responsibilities seriously, they're the ones who should be not promoted and not given big contracts. They should be told, good luck, goodbye,
Perhaps we should move to the Chinese medicine approach, that you pay your doctor a subscription and then you stop paying him if you get sick until you're better. That may be apocryphal, but it's perhaps a good illustration of how we come around to it. But Carmel, if I could go to you, like within all of this, and education and awareness are both being highlighted here in this, and again, even there's comments in the chat about perhaps even at primary school level for this. But are you seeing a change in the demand from the business side in terms of risk awareness and perhaps education at that higher level?
We are, Paul, but I think we should be seeing more. And I think that one of the things that I put it down to quite often is that thing that we say, if we're attacked and not when we're attacked. And I think a lot of organizations, as Michael has alluded to, a lot of organizations don't, and somebody did in the chat actually as well, they kind of know what to do, but they haven't been hit. We have a culture probably globally of organizations not putting up their hands and saying, you know, it was me, I was hit. And I think to a great degree that it won't affect us, it won't hit us. And there's also this misconception out there that, you know, well, I make widgets, so, you know, they're not going to come after me. They're going to go after the big players in the market with the deep pockets. But actually, for a cyber criminal, I'm sure it's easier for them to hack 10 people who make widgets than one massive big tech company or bank or financial institution or whatever. So, you know, I think we should be seeing more of this. I think it's great that we have Cybersecurity Month, because at least it brings the focus back. But this needs to be, you know, as we can see, a couple of months go by and there's a new set of attacks. How do you know about that if you're not keeping some way up to date? Every organization should be doing cybersecurity training annually, and as soon as somebody new comes in the door, they should be going on that, and it should be updated. So whatever the latest scams, the latest types of attacks are, they should be included in that. We have tried a number of things in terms of, you know, trying to get the message out there and trying to provide programs that will engage around the awareness, around the skills, one of which is, you know, to add gamification. So we run virtual capture the flags. And the goal here is an organization would take a virtual capture the flag, engage in it, the whole organization, both technical, non-technical people. It's a series of challenges. I kind of naively tried to describe it as, it's almost like going on a table quiz. You're part of a team of 4 and you solve puzzles and challenges, a lot of them related to cybersecurity. So you're in a safe environment, your people get to learn what works and what doesn't work, what they should or shouldn't do. And it's a great way to keep the awareness going. So we should be seeing more of it. I mean, we see a lot of requirements for virtual capture the flags, for our master's programs, for the, as I said, with Paul's, that big step up from businesses looking to sort of see, well, you know, I have an IT group, but, you know, and they look after our cyber, or it's even great to hear if they're actually beginning to outsource some of that. But, you know, how do I know what to protect in my organization? How do I know what data is at risk? You know, do I look at that across the whole organization? Because that will be different from in the finance department to maybe the HR department. What assets do I have? It's all of those things that, you know, you need to have sort of a joined up plan, to have a risk assessment done in your organization, and then to have a cybersecurity plan that aligns with that. But it also needs to be rolled out. That's the other thing. It can't remain with the leaders and the managers in the organization. Everybody needs to be aware of what it is. And I mean, I was kind of in a way laughing to myself. I think it was it Michael or Paul said about the backups. I mean, how many organizations have been hit and they go, oh yeah, well, we've got the backups, and then they go to, you know, bring back the backup and the damn thing doesn't work, because effectively, when did they ever test it? 6 years ago when they started doing it, maybe, you know. So there's all these things that we can do to help protect ourselves. And as, you know, both of the guys have said, you know, it doesn't prevent an attack, but it may put you in a much better position when and if that attack happens, because unfortunately, you know, it's not if, it's when. And I think that's what we all need to realize, you know. But when I started getting those things to my phone that were telling me it was my bank text messaging me, and the number was the same as my bank, it was coming in the middle of a stream of other stuff that had come from my bank. You know, it only for I was clued in at the minute that I saw it, and I thought, that doesn't make sense. Just whatever they were asking me at the time actually just didn't make sense for me at that point in time. So yeah, I didn't click it. But on another day, had they said something different,
indeed,
I'd have clicked it.
Can I just Carmel, sorry, when you say it's not if but when, I think that's really important. It's and that's the same for everybody. And I see there's some comments there and some people not very happy with what I said about the HSE. I think just come back on that for a second. It's not if but when. You know, at the end of the day, the interesting thing was, and I'm not criticizing any frontline workers or any of that, because I think they did fantastic work. However, at the end of the day, if you do get hit, you're not typically in a position to actually provide the service that you're trying to provide. And whatever, whether it's a business, whether it's healthcare, whatever it is, and that's the impact. And you know, the horrible part is we've seen ransomware attacks. We've seen internationally, particularly taking out on hospitals. People's lives are lost as a result of these things. So the impacts can be very significant and very, very severe. So I think we need to take this an awful lot lot more seriously at an Ireland Inc. level. And I see there's a comment there, you know, is there a government website? Is there some sort of, you know, is there some guidance out there? There are certain guidances, but it's really interesting. Other governments have internationally do this really, really quite well. We haven't sort of seen that type of leadership, and perhaps it's due to underfunding, perhaps it's due to but that's a board level, whether it's Ireland Inc. at a board level, whether it's the organization company at a board level. So people who will run businesses own businesses, and they look to make those decisions. So, you know, it's everybody's responsibility.
Okay, well, now seems an opportune time to run our first poll and sort of get the experiences of our audience. So I'll just ask our producer Sarah if you could line up the first poll for today. And while people are interacting with that, so just to read it out there: has your organization experienced any suspicious cyber activity in the last 6 months? So just as people are getting to grips with that, Paul, if I could come to you. On the more sophisticated end of things are things like targeted attacks, where an individual within an organization or a specific organization could be targeted because of what they do or because of the lucrative market they're in or whatever. So if an organization does find itself on the end of a targeted attack, what typically are the signs, or you know, how would a normal range of protective measures stand up to that kind of activity?
Okay, so it really depends on the kind of attack and the kind of organization, to be honest, Paul. I mean, but if we look at, say, somebody that might be part of the critical national infrastructure, like maybe the health sector, and if somebody is being hit with an attack like that, that's not what we call an advanced attack. An advanced attack is something like an APT that is maybe nation state supported and used, and you're up against a military force who's trying to attack into you. So that's when we talk about advanced targeted attacks, APT kind of attacks, whatever. But actually, when we talk about the impact of low-level attacks like ransomware being so effective on the critical national infrastructure and potentially has cost lives, you know, hitting the HSE, and we won't turn this into a HSE bashing thing because obviously they do great work, but there's a lesson in all of this around that. So when you're up against APT attacks, if you're a big American conglomerate, okay, you've got the protection of the NSA, the FBI, and all the resources of the American government, right? But all of those organizations actually exist in this ecosystem that we call Ireland, and could be deemed as the soft underbelly of the American economy, from the point of view that it's becoming so easy for these threat actors to operate with almost impunity within Ireland's ecosystem. Because where's the resources for the guards? Where's the resources for the NCSC? Where's the leader of the NCSC? Where's their office? You know, where's the defense forces and all the kind of proper salaries they should have to get the proper kind of talent and retain it in there? We need, as Ireland Inc., to get a strategy together and to be able to deploy that to protect everybody who operates and be able to attract more foreign direct investment and build upon the great work of the IDA and everybody else like that. But for most organizations, what you'll find at the end of the day is, and COVID has taught us this, right? We're interconnected, we're interdependent. And if we do the basics of hygiene, guess what? We're all still alive, right? So it's the same when it comes to cyber and cybersecurity. We're interconnected, we're interdependent. And if we take care of cyber hygiene, we will prevent and stop the impact of most cyber threats. We really will. If you have the updates on, if you have the proper kind of solutions in place, and if that's put in a risk managed way appropriate for the change in your business model. And I'll just go off on a slight tangent on that. We've all changed our business model since COVID. People are working from home. Their inherent risk level has changed. Therefore, the appropriateness of the controls, the security architecture, everything has to change in line with the new way they're operating with their customers, with their suppliers and everything. So everybody has to readdress this area, as Carmel and Michael were saying as well. Everybody needs to readdress this. It can't be the same as it was pre-COVID. That has been a catalyst. And final point I'm making this, Paul, is because we're talking about, you know, getting this out of being an IT issue and it's a board issue, whatever. People spend millions and millions and millions trying to establish a good brand. And that's all about qualitative risk and brand damage and the reputation damage. And as they're trying to build digital businesses, it's all about brand and trust. So cybersecurity should be seen as an investment, not a cost. Stop looking at it as a cost on a bottom line on a P&L and going, can we spend less? Can we do this and whatever? It's an investment into your brand and your ability to withstand attacks and be able to be resilient and be able to bounce back and cover on. They're going to happen. Carmel says, Michael says, everybody has, the world knows these attacks will happen. Can you detect it? Would you know it's happened? Are you being attacked right now? Can you respond? Can you recover? Right? They're all the tenets of the NIST cybersecurity framework. That's a course delivered again in partnership with Technology Around ICT Skillnet, the NCSE course, approved by NIST worldwide as well. And that's something from Ireland we're leading the world with on that education path. People need to understand the basics of a framework or how to deal with this. Fire safety, we learn how to do it properly, prevent and be able to deal with it.
That takes us nicely into the poll results there. So I think, while it's unsurprising that the majority at 53% have seen suspicious cyber activity in the last 6 months, more than a third who say don't know is perhaps worrying. I think it would be safe to presume that of the don't knows, the majority have experienced it. They just don't necessarily know.
That's a safe assumption.
I think what Paul said there is the inherent risk level has changed, and I think that's really important. That COVID has been the biggest digital transformation exercise or project ever, and has brought things forward many years. And I would just, I know everybody listens to these types of sessions and say, gosh, this all involves me spending more money. I think there is some more money to be spent by many organizations. However, in many cases, money needs to be spent a bit more wisely. Sometimes there's a lot of protections. The environments have changed. Your workers are outside of the business. They're not inside of the business. They're outside of the office. They're not inside of the office. So the typical protections that may have been inside of the office, stopping people coming in and going out, may have to change to different types of protections need to be put in place. And there's a lot of very, very smart technologies out there that are not actually expensive. What I always worry about is when I come across some organization saying, listen, you know what, we're spending plenty of money on cyber, so we're in good shape, but we haven't changed anything we're doing for some years. That suggests to me that they're doing the wrong things. They may be spending the right amount of money. They may be spending too much, they may be spending too little, but they're not spending it necessarily in the right stuff. So they need to review your protections need to review. And you talked about fire safety, etc. All of these things get reviewed as threats change, as we go higher rise, things change, and that's just the reality of life. So I think organizations, and from small to medium to large, and indeed the households, they need to change, because if you look at an average household now, and I don't know what an average household looks like, my children thankfully have flown the nest, but if I looked some time back when we had games consoles around the place, we had smartphones, we had all sorts of tablets and everything else. The amount of devices and the number of devices and the number of ways to connect within the home, forget about the fridge connected to the internet. What about all the rest of the stuff? There's lots there. So that environment has changed. So the environment, so the protections absolutely must change with it.
Okay, well, I'm just going to jump in towards some questions now, because there's some great exchanges going on in the chat, and there's some good sharing of information from different resources, staysafeonline.org, and there was references to NIST resources, which Paul was highlighting as well. But just please do use the chat, or the Q&A function rather, to address direct questions, and we do have one in. Neil has said that cybersecurity should be a discussion topic at home around the kitchen table, with parents discussing with children. So I suppose it's kind of developing on from the suggestion of it being potentially a school topic as well. So in your own respective experiences, I suppose, as parents, possibly as cybersecurity professionals as well, where are the appropriate places for these conversations, and where needs more of these conversations? Maybe Paul, do you want to take that one first?
Sure, no problem. I mean, I think we need to remember what we're talking about here is culture. Whether it's in an organization or at home with children, whatever, you're talking about the culture of how they're going to treat cyber-related risk, and that's set with policy. right? So whether it's the home policy of, hey, listen, we need to know who you're engaging with online, or what hours you're doing, or what kind of sites you're going to, that's policy. It's the same principles you would use within an SME, within a large organization, just to a different level. And the amount of trust that you give children, or the amount of trust that you give your staff on what they're able to do, is going to be based on their ability to be able to handle that and be cyber savvy around it. But I would agree with Neil. I mean, this is something where at home people should be articulating the risk of these devices. And we're not just talking about getting addicted to the ludic loops built into these things and all, but getting next strain and getting addicted to all their favorite apps, but more about the point of view of the consequences of giving away yourself, giving away your privacy, giving away yourself a persona, and the risks you associate with all of that. We can go very dark with that, obviously, about where that leads up. But these things are completely addictive. You know, and they're designed to be addictive. And that's why, you know, these guys get this crisis of conscience when they've made their 100 million in Twitter, and then they go off and they say, oh, I feel really bad about making 100 million. I don't let my own kids use tablets, and I don't let them go onto the internet and all that kind of stuff, because they know morally and ethically they have done the world a disservice with a lot of the coding that has been created and a lot of the way these apps interact. And you know, we see from the whistleblowers, even in Facebook. I mean, you know, I was talking to somebody recently, said, well, if Facebook made cars, they disable the airbags. It's as simple as that, because they think they can make more money by not having airbags or seatbelts. Maybe they wouldn't even put brakes in the car, because it's all about the money and it's all about the greed. And we have to realize then, as parents, how do we protect ourselves from Mark Zuckerberg? So that's the reality. Mark Zuckerberg's a threat actor, probably the biggest threat actor in the world. He's developed one of the biggest pieces of malware in the world, known as Facebook. And if it's not, well, then it's a defective product that needs to be fixed. It's as simple as that. So you need to protect your children from things like that. And then, of course, within businesses, lots of things out there like that that are effectively threat actors, or risks to children, or risk to businesses and people themselves.
Paul, do you think, though, that there are a lot of parents that don't really know how to change those settings on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, you know, in terms of, you know, one, protecting themselves and therefore protecting their children? Because certainly I've read the bump, and I'm not always sure that, you know, what's displaying and what's not displaying, etc.
It's a great question, Carmel, because I think the reality is that we shouldn't need to know how to install airbags into our cars ourselves. You know, it's an engineering issue. They should be built in, and we should be able to switch them on quite easily if we want, and only take them off if we really need to switch off the airbags when it comes to that. And I think when people realize that, for example, you know, these in-app purchases, I came across this recently. This is a play from Google where somebody had been in an app that handed their phone to their child, and the child bought 3,000-4,000 euros worth of in-app purchases, and they contact Google and said, hey, this is wrong. My child did this. I didn't realize that it was linked to my wallet and we're paying all these things. They said, yeah, we'll give you back your money, but you need to do a training course. And we're going to train you how to use your phone properly before we refund you your money. So look, it's an interesting take on the way it goes on, but there is a community of responsibility. But this all breaks down to the easier you make something to use, the less secure it is. Right? We all know this from two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. We get rid of all the passwords we're in, but it's not very secure, right? So it's all those kind of basics. But I think that there's an onus, and I've talked about this before at the EU Cyber Summit. Next one's on November 30th, by the way, and I hope you all go to it. But I mean, from the perspective of this, there's only two products in the world that don't have to work: religion and software. And you've no comeback. You pay for it, and it doesn't have to work. It doesn't have to do anything, and you can't sue anybody. You can't do anything about it. It's a defective product if you're getting something and it's causing your children to get depressed and maybe worse. It's a defective product if it allows people to hack into it and steal your data and destroy your business. But you can, like, if there's an issue with your operating system and somebody has hacked in and take it, who do you sue? You don't, because you have absolutely no recourse with any of these products until the world changes their perspective on that. And regulations. We're always going to be susceptible, and we're always going to be vulnerable to the bad guys, because they can just keep trashing out crap code, and the more lines of code and the more little fancy features, the more risks that are within that ecosystem and those point of things. So you know, it's a root cause analysis. You know,
Very middle of the road viewpoint there, Paul.
That's me sitting on the fence getting splinters in my ass, Michael.
But can I just come back to
sorry, just before you start, Michael, I'm just going to ask our producer Sarah to line up our second poll, and then Michael, I'll come to your comment, and then there's actually another question there in the chat stream that I'll come to on that. So Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to say to Carmel there, you're in terms of it's always been find a child of 12 and they'll sort it out for you. Like that is the reality, and as I get older, I need to find whatever anybody younger than me who can do it, and that's most people at this stage. But I think you are right, and that's what we see in organizations. If you're a solicitor's firm or whatever it is that your practice, that's what you are. You're a solicitor's. If you're an accountancy firm, that's what you are. If you're a wholesale distributor, that's what you are. You're not a technology business. So and neither should you have to be a technology business to use the technology to. We pick up a telephone and we answer a telephone. You used to answer phone. Now you just send it a message. But in the old days, when you pick up a telephone, you didn't have to know how the telephone worked. So we shouldn't need to know all the things and the intricacies necessarily about a computer, but businesses are being forced with these sort of things, and they haven't got those sort of capabilities and those skills. So I think that whole management and delivering systems that work, that are protected, that are secure is the real challenge. And if we need a national type of involvement, as Paul suggests, I think that makes a lot of sense, but we certainly need to contract to the right people who will actually do the right thing and deliver the right stable systems.
Okay, well, just coming to the question then, while we're just letting the poll run, Anik is asking, Paul, what do you feel is an effective way of delivering the cyber risk / investment argument to the board of directors, and what are the key areas to look at?
Great question, Anik. Thank you for that. The best way to do this is look, and Michael's actually alluded to some of it there, where if you're a lawyer, you're a lawyer, and so on. On a board, or business owners are busy, right? But they're making decisions all the time, and calculated, informed decisions all the time. They're risk assessing in the head, they're making decisions all the time. So when you go to a board or the business owners, and if you hand them a vulnerability assessment report or a pen test report, you're not going to engage with them, right? They're looking at CVE vulnerabilities and everything else like that. But if you're able to align and articulate that risk in relation to what their objectives are and what their motivations are. So if you're talking to someone in marketing, you're going to talk about the fact that it could be brand damage. You're talking about the CFO, you're talking about potential fines, or you're talking to the CEO and you're talking about, this cool new app we want to roll out next month and we're all going to do really well out of it. Well, here's the risks associated with that. You need to bring it back to a business level. You need to use meaningful metrics. And making it meaningful to the business means they'll engage and they get it. But if you start talking about, we've 30,000 Windows 7 machines. So what does it mean? You have to actually articulate in a way that the business is going to understand what that means from a risk perspective. You need to take the techie stuff out, but there's an onus on the other side of the business for them to understand some of this terminology, understand, architecture, maybe the cloud or how things are actually operating within their own business ecosystem, so they can understand what those risks are. So there's that conversation where they have to meet midway between the techies and between the people who are trying to convey this. Or we end up with another financial crisis where the people at the top hadn't got a Scooby-Doo what was going on, and the people down below had their hands in the air screaming and going, it's all going to come crashing down, it's all going to come crashing down like it did in 2008. So I mean, it's that kind of situation we're heading for. It's almost a perfect storm where we can all see there's lots of things going wrong. The business going, I hear it, I see it in the media, but I haven't a clue what I should be doing. And really, they should be educating themselves and doing something like a CCO course so they're enabled to ask the right questions and understand the data that they're getting from the people that have that. As Michael says, the people that will be able to deploy these solutions.
Very good. Okay, well, I'm just going to share those results now for that poll, and then I'll come to Michael after that on that strategy side of things. But the results here: that has your organization experienced a cybersecurity breach in the last 6 months? And 29% have said yes, 48% no, and 23% don't know. So that's probably a fairly representative sample of the wider experience. Would anybody like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, breaches are widespread. That's just the reality of it. But it's the impact of these breaches. I think that's the really important thing that people have to put into. into context of their own organization, their own lives, their own home, their own business. You know, if it takes place in the home or a household, and it actually compromises them financially, or starts emptying bank accounts or whatever it may be, or indeed compromises their personal details, so that they can be fraudulently misrepresented outside. That's an issue. But if it takes place in the business, and somebody, let's say, it has done the classic CEO CFO fraud for a couple of $100,000 or $500,000, or there's a ransomware attack which takes them down for a couple of $100,000, or indeed that they can't recover because of a ransomware attack, and they haven't got adequate backups, that could be the total business destroyed. So it's the impact of those things that I think is very severe, and that's not something that you get easily on a poll, unfortunately. And especially if you look at, you know, Ireland is SME Inc., if you like there's lots of small, medium businesses. A lot of these are family businesses. And if you impact a family business and you impact the wealth of that family business, you destroy that family. So you've got to, and I would be an absolute advocate of not going off over the board. Not everybody here is a defense organization. Not everybody here is a bank. Not everybody here needs to be at that level right up there at the top, but they need to be at an appropriate level. They shouldn't be wasting money on solutions and technologies that are not right, but they should be spending money and investing money, as Paul suggests, in getting the return, a sensible security return on solutions that are right. Most of these organizations, they have, you know, you wear seatbelts, you have airbags in your car. For what reason? For safety, for self-preservation. You have alarms in your house, you have CCTV monitoring, you have whatever things you have in place. You know, you have locks in your door, locks in your gate, locks in your garage. You have all these things in place. You should have those in place for your business, and they should be reviewed. Like if you're going for an insurance for your home or your office, you'll get a security review. Somebody will come in and say, this is good, you have protections in place, they're right there, you need to up the protections. You should do this for a cyber point of view. This should be done. It should be a minimum level done at a minimum. It should be done for cyber. For sure.
Yeah, can I echo that as well, Michael? Because that's a great point you're making about the impact on families and so on. Because I see that all the time. Businesses being destroyed, families going, what do we do now for our income? And the guilt that they get as being a victim as well, you know, is something that doesn't go away overnight. And this point you're making about the appropriate level, I mean, is it one of the things we've mentioned, CRI, my company, and Cyber Prism, that's so for what that's doing. 100% of the time, I can tell you this is a finding, is it analyzes what security controls somebody has in place vis-a-vis what should be appropriate. And 100% of the time, they've invested in areas above the risk level, in very expensive technology. And that's the point Michael's making, is that there may be gaps down below that were less expensive for things that actually have them exposed from a risk perspective. But yet they've been spending money up here on a new fancy pants intelligence feed developed by gaming developers, and it looks great and all that, and the techies want to play with all the toys, and that's where all the money went. But actually down here, they didn't have the policies, they didn't have the training, they didn't have all the basic stuff that actually protects you on a day-to-day basis. And that's the stuff, the baseline stuff. And security is cumulative. You have to go from baseline up. You can't just walk out, throw money at it, and buy a high-level, advanced level of security. You just can't. It doesn't work. It needs all those things underneath.
That brings us nicely into, I'm going to take one more question from the chat, and bearing in mind that we're coming down now to our last kind of 7 or 8 minutes here. So there's a question from Roger, and it's a good prompt, because what I'll do is I'll ask each of you for a key suggestion or a favorite resource for this. But it said that, is there a government or Garda free website for small businesses to go through a cybersecurity checklist? Is anyone aware of such a resource?
Look, I could talk about the NCSC has a website, and they put out some good advice. The guards themselves put out the best advice they can based on the resources they have. That's the caveat, the resources they have. They need more resources. Okay. I think what a lot of people do is they hop over to the .co.uk version of those websites and find that there's a lot more detail. ENISA has some great advice and some websites out there from a European perspective as well. So there's lots of stuff up there. What happens when people start trawling through this stuff is they find find it's very Americanized, a lot of it, when they end up with that piece. We provide a lot of material up on ICTTF.org as well. For example, we developed a whole ransomware workshop piece around that as well, when ransomware was basically pulling, all these Irish businesses as well. And we have done that. What is it? How do you prevent it? How do you respond? How do you recover? All that kind of stuff as well.
Very good. Michael, what resources do you point people to?
Yeah, exactly what Paul is saying there. Really, the resources that are provided from a state level here are relatively poor. Now, that may be because of resourcing and everything else. They're better when you go across the water.co.uk, and they're as Paul suggested, they are very Americanized, but they are very good in the US as well. They're also very good in Australia. So there's some very good ones internationally, and I would look to those. But what I would say to anybody is, if you're looking for advice and guidance, go to the people you deal with from the point of view of supplying a trusted partner, a trusted advisor. The people people that we work with are all the industry, if you like, in an Irish context. They're the people who deliver you, who will sort out your laptops, your PCs, your networks, and your printers and all of those things, and put in your VPNs and deliver that. Talk to them about what they believe they can deliver to you, and they can deliver to you at an effective rate, which will give you not just up to date, but will give you monitored. And MDR is the buzzword that I would be talking about out there. It's somebody who's delivering a managed detection response type of service to you, so they're actually going to manage it. They're going to be there looking at your organization when you're not there. And so 24/7, and they're going to be able to intercept something and operate. And to Paul's point there, and I think it was really, really well put, is there's a lot of people invest in lots of toys that give them lots of pictures and lots of graphs and everything else, but they don't know what to do with them. So there's no point. Work with some partners at a local level who can help you.
Okay, Sarah, if we could just run our last poll then, because it's relevant, I think, to the wrap up. Carmel, if I could come to you, from that skills perspective then, as we take that sort of longer view in terms of how quickly the threat landscape changes. So we saw how quickly we went from the ransomware to the phone scams locally, all this sort of thing. So as you take that sort of collective look on in how to meet demand, what are the I suppose the methodologies that you're looking at in terms of learning and getting across those messages, as well as the focus areas?
Yeah, so I suppose it comes down to just the two main areas, which would be technical. So, if you're looking to upscale, cross-scale, grow, technical awareness in the cyberspace, we have a number of programs that actually address that. We have a master's in cybersecurity, which actually will start in January next year. So I think they're actually open for applications at the moment. And very much our learning is applied. So the student gets that academic content, but our focus is to make sure that it's applied, so that when they walk away from it, they don't have this big bunch of knowledge in their head about cybersecurity, but they can actually do things and apply the knowledge that they've learned. And then I think the other side of it is very much to look at, which has been a big focus actually of today, is that business side of it. Find out what you don't know. So look at doing, one of the risk assessment courses with ICTTF that we run. Understand what your responsibility is as a leader in an organization, whether that's a department head, whether it's a senior leader in the organization. I know we pitch it at senior leaders, but it is something that actually ultimately starts to filter down through to first, second line and first line managers in the organization. Because I think, if you run a department in any company, you really need to understand what the risk is. And it needs to be that joined up thinking. It is the business people and the technical people coming together, and either you're going to make sure you're fully secure yourself with your own people, or as Michael said earlier, you may actually go and outsource it. So, there are programs there. There are organizations out there that can help you too. I mean, in terms of that risk assessment, it might be worth reaching out to Cyber Ireland. I don't think they have specifically something, but they certainly have a network of members who are all in the cybersecurity space. And obviously the two guys that are here today, I'm sure would be able to either assist with that or point people in the right direction, as we will. If anybody comes and talks to us, we'll certainly be happy to. We can't do it ourselves. We'll certainly be happy to try and help people find somebody who can do it.
Okay, well, just sharing those poll results then, do you think your organization has the skills in-house to properly protect the current from the current range of cyber threats? And 43% say yes, but an equal proportion say no. So, and then there's a significant portion of don't knows as well. So I think that really does highlight the fact that there is a need out there for clarification, for resources, and it's good to see that people are willing to admit that, I think. So unfortunately, we're just out of time now. So there are still several other questions, but there's also several good resources shared in the chat there. So hopefully people would have taken note from them. So just I suppose we can wrap up, I suppose, by acknowledging the fact that cybersecurity is a layered phenomenon. There's no single silver bullet that's going to do anything. Awareness, training, skills, proper support from the top down, as well as proper engagement from the bottom up is necessary. And that no one is ever fully safe, but you can make yourself the safest house on the block. And I think with that, we can perhaps wrap up from there. So Paul C Dwyer from ICTTF, Michael Conway from Renaissance, Carmel Somers from ICT SkillNet. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our producer, Sarah, for driving today and providing our polls. And hopefully you can join us again for another ICT SkillNet webinar. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to everybody for attending. Thanks for all the comments and questions. And hopefully we've provided some good information for you on which to build for your own organization. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.